Wow. Something like that. Call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Finkel,
Here.
Albert Hayes,
Here.
David Bergstresser,
Here.
Anthony Netto,
Excused.
Jeffrey Rosenthal,
Here.
Robert Moore,
Also excused.
Robert Leslie,
Here.
Robert Fulton,
Here.
John Hudson,
Here.
Stephanie Rozicki,
Here.
Richard Ferrari, here. Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. We need a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda, and we have to revise it to allow for an executive session to go over labor issues.
So moved. I'll second.
All in
Mr.
favor?
Hayes, Mr.
Aye.
There's a lot of people in the room, but I don't have a guest sheet. Is there any? I have the speakers.
Okay.
Is that up? Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. And if I mess up any names, please forgive me. Guests, we have Bob Feller from the Board of Supervisors. Hi. Alana Marianne Blanchett.
No, he's from Bond Shun King, Board Supervisor.
No, that's what I thought that said.
He's accountant.
Okay, sorry. Alana Marianne Blanchett. Welcome. Fred, and I can't read that. I'm sorry.
Wilhelm.
Wilhelm. Oh, I know you. I just, Carla Colby. John Ellithorpe. Shane Mans. Here. Thank you. Matt Clemens. Peter Murphy. And Gene Murphy. Well, welcome everybody. Although I know some of you were speaking at another time, but Peter Murphy has signed up to speak to address the group. And we are ready for you.
Expecting to
Right there, right at the corner of the table.
Right
if you
here?
would. Thank you.
We're recording, so you got to be near the mic.
I am Peter Murphy, and I live at 3031 South Shore Road. I'm also the co-chair of the Property Owners Association of today, and I'm here today to bring attention to a serious problem at Track 80, an unlocated area on the Great Sacandaga Lake. Track 80 is approximately 2+ acre parcel that is between the South Shore Road and the water and the east side of the lake, on the east side of the lake, and about 3.5 miles south of the Conklinville Dam. The area is rocky, but also offers several hundred feet of sandy beach and can have as many as 100 people utilizing this area for swimming on every summer day. I should add, this area also hosts many visitors in the spring, fall, and even ice fishermen in the winter. Approximately 15 cars can park in a lot on the top and on the grounds, and on the shoulder of the South Shore Road is utilized by as many as 20 to 40 cars on a busy day. There are signs posted stating that no camping is permitted, a request that visitors not litter or leave human waste, and the disclaimer that the Hudson River Black River Regulating District is not responsible for any injury that occurs while people are using state property. No signage states the hours of operation or any other rules or regulations that need to be observed. After each weekend, Hudson River Black River personnel clean up this area. No bathrooms or trash cans are available on the premise, and you only need to talk to the people responsible for cleaning the area to get an idea of the amount of trash that's left after a busy weekend. Despite the efforts to clean the beach, broken glass is a real problem, and no one should walk in this area barefoot. This is a location that has been the scene of tragedies, and there will be more if efforts are not made to control the people who visit Tract 80. The most disruptive situations occur as the sun is setting. This location enjoys some of the most beautiful sunsets on the lake, and teenagers and adults show up with alcohol, wood, and amplification equipment in preparation for an evening of partying. This year already, we've had problems occur on 5 evenings. Last Thursday, May 5th, the situation was out of control by 11:30 p.m., and we called the Saratoga Sheriff's Department. The deputy arrived an hour after our call to find 20 students from college who'd returned to the area and had a roaring fire and were drinking beer. The beer cans were still there on Friday afternoon when we visited the spots, as the photographs will indicate. Despite visits from the Luzerne Hadley fire chief, who was called out to the scene because the fire prohibition is in effect, and 3 sheriffs who came, and entry 25998-16 documented that the police and fire department responded. By allowing people to utilize the area with no rules or regulation, events like this are inevitable. Sadly, nothing can be done to end it, because when the police find a situation like this, they will not arrest anyone, and they will not tell them they must leave. The owners, administrators of the property must make the complaint to law enforcement for them to arrest people for trespassing or disorderly conduct. And another problem is that the police will not tell people who are drinking or drunk to leave the area. In fact, the police told me that the students were very respectful and agreed to quiet down. The fire chief instructed them to put out the fire. Once the authorities left at 1:30 a.m., the visitors added several more logs to the fire, and the party resumed until 3:15 a.m. This property, I think, is under the supervision of Hudson River Black River, and I believe that we need some action from the regulating district before another terrible incident occurs. I'm aware of 3 times in recent years when people were taken by ambulance to hospitals after injuring themselves on rocks that are submerged under the water. After the second serious incident, I had to call and inform the regulating district that a rope swing had been reinstalled after a young girl had been seriously injured and I think paralyzed. During that incident, the EMS responders had to bring the girl over to our property to be able to carry her up to the ambulance because the sand dune is so steep they could not carry her up to that way. Only after the most recent incident was just last year when a man tried to jump into the water from a tree and didn't make the water. How many times do we need to be reminded of the volatility of an unsupervised area becoming the scene of serious injury or even death? The potential for disaster is extremely high. Unsupervised and unguarded swimming, alcohol not restricted on the premises, fires permitted unless a county-wide ban is in effect, broken glass all over, erosion causing trees to fall onto the beach and block walking areas. It is difficult to negotiate the beach in some areas because of fallen trees, and I can only imagine people doing it in the dark. In addition to these incidents is the problem of people using this area for camping. Despite posted signage that says no camping, over the years we have had many people pitching tents for the weekend. I would like to commend the forest rangers. Several weeks ago, we contacted them and they responded by coming on both Saturday and Sunday to inform a camper that this was not acceptable. The camper had not followed the ranger's instruction as to camping and had stayed overnight, although he was told to leave. This parcel of land is a tinderbox for serious injury and even death. As a person who has witnessed the victims of unsupervised and unregulated activities in the area, I know that we need the Hudson River Black River to respond and make enforceable regulations and communicate them to law enforcement agencies so this area can be utilized by responsible individuals who understand the need for respecting the rights of everyone around the lake. The Saratoga Sheriff's Department, the State Police, and the DEC need to be informed as to what is approved by the Hudson River Black River when unacceptable behavior occurs, and they need to take what kind of action. And I thank you this morning.
Well, thank you very much. Wow. I think we need to, take this under advisement and figure out what can be done. And I promise you we will do that.
I only don't know, and I understand it would take legal counsel, but from my discussions, it seems as though people are allowed on that property, and I don't know what steps can be taken to see that there is some time regulation, and that's really, I think, what we're looking for is somebody to say, there are hours you can use this, and then police and other agencies can tell people what they can and can't do.
Okay. And I know that there's sometimes an issue of telling people who've been drinking and putting them out on the road is an issue, and I know that as well.
Well, and that's why we're so interested in having a time frame, because a lot of parks, and I understand, have dawn to dusk, and we're not saying people should leave it, but I think a reasonable expectation is that they leave when it gets dark. There's no lighting, there's no bathroom facilities, there's nothing there that they can utilize.
Okay, well, we will, I promise you we'll take it under advisement.
Thank you so much.
And I guess, okay, we're at number 7 on our agenda.
No other speakers?
I know, that's all I had on my list, unless there's anybody else who did want to speak that wasn't on the list. Okay, thank you. I need approval of the April 12th, 2016 board minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Rosenthal.
I'll second it.
Mr. Bergstrom.
Any additions or corrections?
Nothing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8 is an issue we have to discuss. Start out, let me call on Acting Director, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, the board has been in receipt of council's memo dated 3/31/2016. If it pleases the board, I'd like to just go over this memo, so just bear with me. This matter reaches the board pursuant to revocation and hearing rules promulgated by the district's rule, and in this case it's 6 NYCRR Part 606. Those rules governing use by permit holders of state and owned property at Great Sacandaga Lake give the board wide latitude to issue and revoke access permits. The particular rule at issue in this case, 606.46, provides that no project on any permit access shall be undertaken prior to regulating district approval. Staff allege that 3 permittees identified above, that's William P. Gizzi and Andrea Gizzi, Sean Oakley, Connie Edwards, caused to be removed extensive quantities of materials from the Sacandaga Reservoir without authorization, and that pursuant to 606.95A1, such permittees' failure to comply with 606.46 constitutes sufficient cause for the board to cancel or revoke all 3 permits. Further, upon information and belief, each of the 3 access permit holders hold a deed reserving a right of access over and across their respective access permit area. By example, the Gizzi deed language limits the right of access to such place or ways as may be approved by the state or regulating district. The Gizzi deed distinguishes between the right of access and the privilege of erecting and maintaining landings and structures on the premise. The deed expressly recognizes that such privilege of construction and maintenance or any use of the access permit area is subject to the rules and regulation of the regulating district and of all agencies having control over the reservoir. As a result, while each permittee may still claim a right of access to the reservoir through their respective deed, revocation of the access permit would render inoperable the deed holder's privilege to erect a dock, mooring, or flagpole, and to utilize such access permit area through placement of a picnic table, fire pit, etc. As a practical matter, policing pedestrian access to the reservoir over these 3 access permit areas would be next to impossible. However, identification and removal of any structure, dock, mooring, or other personal property from the access permit would not pose a daunting burden on staff. Also, because of these types of permits, the rule specifically addresses circumstances under which the board can revoke permits in cases where any access right or use is reserved in the deed, as I just went over. And before the board can do that, the board is required pursuant to 606.96 to serve the permittees a 10-day notice of hearing, accompanied with a statement of the cause or causes upon which the procedure for cancellation or revocation of the permit is based. Again, back to the 10-day notice, this proceeding from last month was adjourned for the 1 month, so we fully satisfied the 10 days.
Any question about that, Mr. Ferrara?
In terms of,
Has any question been raised, Mr. Feller, with regard to notice?
no.
No question with regard to notice. Thank you.
So, the gist of the matter, staff alleged that in February 2014, Edwards, Oakey, and Gizzi each filed a work permit application seeking approval to remove extensive amounts of material from the reservoir. On March 5th, the regulating district denied, March 5th, 2014, the district denied each of those work applications. Going forward, on January 11th, 2016, in response to several complaints received by the office, a field assistant accompanied by other district personnel observed an excavator and a bulldozer working on state land within access permit areas 13,547, 15,260, 15,357. The personnel spoke with permittee Sean Oakley at the site and issued Oakley a stop work notice. Later that day, personnel reported their observations to APA, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. On several ensuing dates, personnel accompanied by other personnel, in this case the administrator John Hudson, met on site at the SFO offices with Conservation Officer Lieutenant John Ellithorpe and Matt Clemens, APA Wetlands Biologist Mark Rooks, APA Protection Specialist Trevor Fravor, DEC Senior Aquatic Biologist Robert Fiorentino, probably butchered his name, New York State DEC Aquatic Biologist James Pinheiro, and at that point, staff learned during those meetings that APA and DEC would plan to conduct their own investigation. On January 15th, Danielle Thorne, district personnel, and Dan Kiskis visited the areas. They basically staked out the boundary to the mean high water line. Staff created a map showing all the ground disturbance in the affected area. Pictures were taken. On January 25th, Administrator John Hudson notified Oakey, Gizzi, and Edwards and Rappaport that a field investigation of the respective access permit areas had revealed ground disturbance with the use of mechanical equipment, all completed without authorization. Again, noted that that disturbance was in violation of Great Sacandaga Lake Historic Properties Management Plan. Asked that a description of the unauthorized work detailing the extent of the ground disturbance with an explanation of how and why the ground disturbance occurred be submitted to the regulating district. And by letter dated January 25, 2016, Mr. Oakey admitted that land was cleared and pushed into the shoreline, raising the height of the shoreline. I continue. Upon information belief, DEC and APA, with input from the district, prepared a draft remediation plan. It's my understanding that that plan was advanced to Oakey, Gizzi, and Edwards in conjunction with an enforcement proceeding commenced by DEC. It's also my understanding that Edwards, Oakey, Gizzi have complied with a small portion of the remediation, and Lieutenant Ellithorpe is here to give us an update on that, so I won't get too into what the status of that is. There was a delay in certain elements of the early remediation plan, and at this point, staff believes that if the board fails to revoke the respondent's access permit, other permittees would be emboldened to violate regulating district work permits and rules in belief that they could enjoy the ensuing recreational benefits of their violation throughout the summer season. Staff note that the incident is not the first time that Oakey has performed unauthorized work on the permit area, the 15,260. On April 5th, 2012, Hudson wrote a letter to Oakey noting a field inspection on the date had revealed unauthorized cutting of live trees. Staff feel that feel clear that despite written work permit application denials, permittees violated 6 NYCRR 60646 by removing, causing to be removed extensive quantities of material from the reservoir without authorization and pursuant to NYCRR 60695 A1. This violation constitutes grounds for revocation of each access permit. Further, staff believe that each permittee should be eligible to apply for an access permit only upon completion of remediation at New York State DEC satisfaction.
Thank you.
And at this point, I'd like to invite Lieutenant Ellithorpe to give us an update on the remediation.
Okay.
My name's Lieutenant John Ellithorpe.
Right there, good. Yep,
Bring it close.
perfect.
Lieutenant John Ellithorpe, DEC, Conservation Officer. I oversee DEC's law enforcement efforts in Region 5, especially in this area, especially within what we like to call the bathtub ring, the area around Great Saginaw Lake. I was called in the early stages of this with my officers, Officer Matt Clemens, Officer Shane Mans, as part of the enforcement effort here. As you're aware, I hope you're aware, board members, that we oversee your enforcement efforts. All right, so I called in to deal with those issues, the state land issues around the lake. All right, we realize this is state land, it is public land. All right, a lot of this falls under our domain as far as the violations. When we have an order like this, these things can be handled, or when we have a violation, it can be handled two ways: criminally or administratively. Administratively is out of court, which is why I get involved with this. I handled administrative actions for DEC under what's called orders on consent. It's an administrative out-of-court settlement. All right. As such, we issued a notice of violation to Mr. Gizzi and Mr. Oki for the violations that occurred on that date. It was our intention to settle the violations under a proposed order on consent. In the very early stages of the violation, we asked that they do some remedial work because it was kind of an emergency type thing. We didn't want the drainage in that area to flow, erode into the lake and cause water turbidity issue. All right. Since that time, which has been nearly 4 months, we've been negotiating with Mr. Feller, their attorney, and we have arrived at no solutions and no agreement over our 4 months. We're in constant negotiation. During that time, the lake came from its bottom fill or holding level to now, I think we're at full. All right. So the time has been lost to do the remedial work that we intended to get done in the early stages. My attorneys in Raybrook are still negotiating with Mr. Feller. Trying to get this done. The only way I can see this work being accomplished is when we reach next year's bottom level once again. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of the negotiations that we're going, but they always involve remedial work, meaning work to correct the situation, stabilize the shoreline, and there's a penalty, a punitive phase in that, which we're still, again, negotiating with them. Quite a lot of people around the lake are constantly calling the district saying, what's going on here? Why aren't you doing something about this? And believe me, we've all been trying. We've all been trying constantly. I know you have to field those questions. My authority does not extend to revocation. Only the board can do that. All right? It is my department's sincere opinion that if you don't revoke in this issue, when are you ever going to revoke? We have a flurry of investigations going around the lake that range from anything from people digging with backhoes to cutting down trees. And as John can tell you, we deal with these things on a case-by-case basis. Usually, you would never hear from me. You might hear about what I've done, but I've never appeared before the board to tell you, what it is we're doing. Because we settle these things, and we move on. And the district makes their recommendations to me. I may or may not include them in an order as I see fit. I write a lot of the orders. This one's above my pay grade, if you will. It's being handled by the attorneys at this point, but I still represent the department in this matter. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Is I said, we're at a point.
There's a
where we're still
remedial
negotiating.
plan, there is a remedial plan,
There are a
and it
couple
has
of-
been rejected or has not been agreed
There are a
to?
couple of different options that have been proposed out there, which we're still negotiating on with their consultant and with Mr. Feller. Nothing has been agreed to at this point. We have no signed document.
And of course, that opportunity for remediation is now
It's
lost.
now passed until we get to the next drawdown, till the shoreline becomes stabilized, which would probably be November, December.
December, probably.
Probably. And at such time, under an order, I would imagine that we would direct certain work to be done under the agreed options and a timetable to have that done. And with that, I would expect that penalties might be forgiven to a certain extent. Let's say, giving you them the incentive to get the work done by this day, we will excuse a portion of the penalties, but certainly not in its entirety.
At what point, if at all, does the administrative/civil approach change into a criminal proceeding?
Never.
Never.
No. What happens is if we fail to reach an agreement, they'll be issued a notice of hearing, it'll appear for an administrative law judge, and then they'll have official hearing there. From then on, a commissioner's issue would be ordered, and if that doesn't resolve things, then they appear before the Attorney General's office.
All civil.
All civil.
All civil.
Once I start down the administrative path, I don't cross over into the criminal
Okay.
path.
But the expectation is, once you've started, there's going to be either an order on consent or a commissioner's order.
Or a commissioner's order,
And
yes.
either of those would include a remediation
Exactly.
plan.
And the penalty, yes.
So were the
Okay.
board to decide to revoke the permit, they could condition the termination of that suspension on completion of a remediation plan, because eventually there will be one.
Well, and similarly, I assume this board has the authority to act independently and conditioned upon a remediation.
Yes, absolutely.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. And Mr. Fowler, who's not on the,
Well, he is.
Yes.
who's not on the Board of Supervisors.
No.
Was I identified?
Von Schoenig.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I think, as all of you know, the people who have the access permits act to a large extent as sort of stewards of the land that they have access permits over. Your personnel and the DEC personnel are not everywhere. And in most cases, the people who own homes along the shore and have the access permits are trying to do things to properly maintain the area because it's the area that they go for vacation, it's the area that they enjoy. They're not, looking to destroy anything. And in our case, this particular area, because of the flows in the lake, has unfortunately been the area where there's been a lot of accumulation of debris and garbage and glass, and this has happened, historically.
Is this the same situation that happened in 2014 when the permit was applied for?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, yes,
so
it's
you've got the same issue in 2014, a permit is applied for and the permit is denied. Is that correct, Mr. Feller? I just want to
Yes.
make sure I understand.
correct.
And no appeal was taken to the board at that time.
No, it was not.
And fast forward 2016, the same work that was applied for and then denied is the same work that then is undertaken by your clients in the absence of a new permit or an appeal, correct?
That's true. yeah.
Okay. And with regard to your concern or your question, or the issue that you raise, that homeowners that live on the lake do the things that are necessary to maintain and keep their shorelines in proper order. That requires a permit, does it not?
Yeah, in most
And your
cases-
clients knew that it required a permit. I don't mean to cut you short, Mr. Feller, but this soft pedaling of your client's conduct, in my mind, is going to get you nowhere. I think Mr. Oki's conduct is reprehensible. He did it not once, twice, and 3 times, snubbing his nose at staff, and snubbing his nose at the law, and snubbing his nose at the procedure. So now you know clearly where I'm coming from as a board member and a property owner on this lake. So let's not soft pedal.
Let's let him finish.
He can finish, but he's not persuading me. I've read the file, I've reviewed all this, let's not waste our time.
Well, the purpose of my discussion here is not to argue that a permit was not needed. It's not to argue that they shouldn't have had a permit. The purpose of my discussion here is to put all of it into perspective and give the board a balanced picture of what went on. And obviously, you will then have to take that information and decide what to do with it. But I want to make sure that the picture is completely balanced. So I think that one of the things that it's important to understand and appreciate is that there was, at the bottom of this hill, it was a mess because a lot of this debris had accumulated over time. It's not an issue that has occurred just last year or the year before. This is an issue that accumulates, that occurs frequently. In fact, my clients have told me sometimes some loose docks have found their way onto their property. So again, this doesn't indicate that, I'm not saying that a permit is not needed to deal with some of this work, but I'm just explaining what the layout was. So my clients did bring in some equipment to do this work. They removed the debris. That debris was sent to a landfill, and some additional soils were removed, which relates to some of the work that they had applied for back in 2014. In January of this year, as Lieutenant Althorpe mentioned, the district personnel and the DEC personnel were on site because I believe they got a call from a neighboring landowner. And I think there's an overall impression from Lieutenant Althorpe's discussion that my clients have simply been trying to push things off and delay and not act responsibly. And I think I want to, again, give you our perspective on that. In the middle of January, there were several people on site, and I checked my notes, and it was February 10th that Lieutenant Althorpe sent his proposed consent order to us. And there were several concerns that we had with the consent order, not in terms of the concept of restoring, but the concerns related to what the restoration plan would look like. And over the next month, or a little bit more than a month, we had a lot of discussions with the DEC through our consultant principally about what those concerns were. And let me just mention some of them just to sort of put some reality to it. One of the issues was whether we would include or place something that would resemble a blanket over the soils. The soils were going to be pushed back into the lake, and for purposes of stabilization, there would be sort of a blanket over them and boulders and the like. And the proposal included this, as I said, this blanket, which has sort of like stakes in it to stabilize it. And our consultant had a number of concerns about that because if these stakes free up and they dissociate from the blanket, they can become safety problems. We also had a number of issues relating to the soils themselves and whether heavy equipment could be supported by the soils that time of the season. Lieutenant Elthorpe mentioned that we did some interim remedial work relating to the area that was designated as a wetland because they considered that an emergency. They asked us to move that as soon as possible. We brought in heavy equipment that was needed and did move that. And we found that that heavy equipment had a great deal of problems in terms of moving in and out of that area. And in fact, we had
This was at what time of year, sir?
I think it was late February. Was it late February? Yeah. And it's a steep area. So the people who have the equipment expressed a great deal of skepticism about their ability to get in and out and do the work. The DEC wanted us to do that time of the year.
And were they the same people that did the work in January, that did the excavation to begin with?
No.
It was a higher contract.
It was a different contract.
And who did the work in January?
I don't know.
We did.
With no concern over the difficulties of getting heavy equipment in and out?
Well, I think the situation, the land was cold. It was colder. The land was a little bit more easily supported.
Well, the guys that went down there with the machines don't want to go down there again. They almost went off the cliff. So they're.
Well, in any event, I'm just trying to explain some of the concerns that we had with the DEC. In addition to that, as I said, we understood that if we implemented a plan, the DEC plan, and something went wrong, it was obviously going to be our responsibility to deal with whatever went wrong. So in our discussions with the DEC, we wanted to make sure that we had a plan that was workable and wasn't going to create safety problems and was not going to create issues with moving heavy equipment in and out. So, we had gone back and forth with the DEC with this. We had suggested to them that one possibility, rather than come up with a final restoration plan, that we might better do something as an interim plan to stabilize it, to make sure that we didn't have erosion and runoff right away, because we were skeptical about the ability to do a full restoration plan before the water level rose. So this has been essentially the back and forth that we've been having with the DEC. It has not been an issue of trying to stonewall the DEC, but rather an issue of trying to come up with a plan that was a workable plan. And some of the issues that we've been trying to work out with them, I think we have progressed on them. In other words, I think we've reached some agreements in terms of options that are going to be available to them. As a matter of fact, it was last week, I guess now. Last week, I spoke with Michelle Krug, who's the regional attorney in Region 5, and we reached, a conceptual agreement on what the consent order would be. She indicated that she was going to write it up and send it to me. And that consent order essentially would have a variety of options that could be used, each of which were acceptable to DEC, and we would be able to choose amongst those to see which ones we thought were best. And to be honest with you, some of the options that they had proposed, while very good for purposes of stabilization, were going to create problems with lake access for us. For instance, the placement of very large boulders just below the mean high water line is going to create difficulties in terms of putting in docks and things like that. So the notion was, and we've discussed this many times, is that we understand that there's a penalty that they're proposing, and there's a certain penalty that's going to be paid that we'll have to figure out. But the purpose of the restoration is not penal. The restoration is not for purposes of penalizing us. The restoration is for purposes of restoring the property to the condition that it was in. And if it can be done in a way that restores it equally well, but provides us a better opportunity for access, there's no reason that that shouldn't happen. So in any event, we have been going back and forth, not just myself with Michelle Crew, but honestly our consultants. And in addition to issues relating to what the restoration plan needs to be, Again, there have been some engineering issues regarding the soils and the ability of the soils to support that heavy equipment. So, in summary, that's kind of where we have gone. Again, I don't want to leave you with the impression that we have taken time simply for purpose of delaying and postponing. We've taken time because we knew that we had ownership of that plan. And if the plan, if problems came up, if we had equipment that went down that steep embankment and couldn't come back up, or we had problems, as I mentioned to you, with the blankets that created the safety problems, it was going to be our problem. So we wanted to make sure it was appropriate. In any event, we have moved on that front, and we anticipate getting the new order from Michelle Crew, I would imagine this week.
And what is the earliest you can act on any of those plans?
It would be in the fall. It would be in the fall. And I think the DEC has recognized that, and the DEC has indicated to us that at this point they wouldn't want us to do anything sooner than that. We've talked about some interim measures, and that's all that can be done right now. I'm going to, after I finish speaking, I'm going to ask Mr. Oki just to speak briefly, or as long as he wants, I guess. There's this sort of undercurrent about this other incident that occurred, and I think that we're dealing with serial offenders. I really don't think that's the case, and I think if you hear his explanation of that earlier event, you'll be able to put it in perspective. The other thing that I want to mention is this. As I said, I think we've tried to be cooperative. We've tried to be cooperative, but we feel we also have to be responsible. In other words, simply signing onto a DEC consent order, which included their plan, our consultants were advising us was going to be very risky. We're not unmindful of the fact that, there's a need to restore the area, but we have to be equally mindful of problems that would arise in doing so. So that's been the essence of the discussions back and forth. The other thing which I think is important to bring to the board here is that I think that the presentations have sort of left everybody with the impression that these types of actions by landowners, where a landowner will move dirt or put in some kind of a structure that requires prior approval, that these things really don't happen, that we're dealing with something that is way out in left field in terms of this incident. Not that anything that other people do excuses anything that we did, okay? But I think, again, to put things in perspective, my clients are aware of many situations, just in their little area, where people have done projects that would require approval, and we don't believe that they have approval, or at least that's our understanding that they don't have approval. And I think that what I intend to do is we're going to go over them. We haven't had a time to, because we're dealing with our situation. But when we get a chance to finish, I think I would like to put those things together and present them to the board and to your council for your own review. And if there's things there that you think that require further investigation with regard to what other property owners have done, I invite you to do that as well, because I know that your intent is not to treat people differently. But these are things that happen with some degree of frequency, okay? This is not an outlier. This is, and so I think that it's important that the board, appreciate that as well. So in any event, I think I've said most of what I want to say. Again, I'd like Mr. Oki to speak, but before he does, if you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Board have any questions?
Not yet.
Well,
No, I'll wait till the end.
Pardon me?
I'll wait till the end.
Okay. All right. Yes, no? Okay. So I just spoke before Sean. Oh, yeah.
Members of the board, Kevin Capobianco, I'm here on behalf of Connie Edwards. She's my mother-in-law. So even though I'm not directly named in there, I want to put a little scope into what's going on, because Mr. Rosenthal, I hear your concerns, and I think they're well thought of. I mean, I think unfortunately when you read a piece of paper, you don't get a chance to know Sean or Bill. So I just want to bring some of that into perspective. As the property in between two great guys and having a father-in-law in 2014 that passed in March, when kind of this whole initial permit thing was going on, a lot of things got lost. But these are not two rogue guys that are just going around saying we're going to do whatever because this is what happens. If you've never been on Lakeside Drive where these three pieces of property are, I can tell you that for the last, I think it's been in the Edwards family 14 years, we would move our dock 60 foot at a time every week and walk through anywhere from 18 inches to 20 inches of sediment and muck, rocks, glass bottles, whatever was there before has always been there. And it's stuck in that mud. And the general joke was don't wear your flippers and don't wear your shoes because you're just gonna lose them. And we pulled plenty out, okay? I know firsthand that way back in the day, my father-in-law talked about it. If he ever did anything with it, I can't tell you that. He's dead. I'm not going to ask him. But I know it's always been a concern. But these guys didn't come up with a plan to create an environment that wasn't going to be better. They came up with a plan to say, hey, listen, we're going to do this because we're a couple of guys that come up here and don't appreciate the lake. I mean, these are guys that, through some of the toughest times personally from our family, helped take care of the property, that help clean up some trees and things like that. They're not, it's so tough when you read a piece of paper and you see, well, listen, he cut down a tree and he didn't have a permit, but it doesn't tell you that he went back and got the permit because he didn't know because he just bought the property. It doesn't tell you that when trees fell down on our property with a father-in-law who was sick, that I was driving to chemo every 2 weeks, that they were the guys that went over and cleaned it up and sent me a message and said, hey, we took care of that for you. I know you couldn't get over there. So I just don't want you to have that taste in your mouth that says, these are two guys that don't care. For me personally, our boat access that's in my mother-in-law's name has a tremendous amount of value. Okay? You know, that's a tradition that I carry on. I had my father-in-law's boat. That's what he left me. And I know these guys didn't do it maliciously. They didn't do it to say, I've been down there now, I see fish swimming, and I see a shoreline that's starting to grow grass. I see water that's actually moving. I don't smell a swamp pit from one of our other neighbors' area that, you know, when the lake comes up, especially if it comes up really high, it would get trapped there. It'd sit all year. You know, we played the mosquito game. You know, I'm not involved with DEC's corrective action. I don't pretend to know anything about it. They're good guys. I'm sure if they've been down there, it's probably a catch-22. You don't want to say what you did. Wow, this actually looks better. But I'm eager to walk on that dirt and go through there and say, you know what, I don't have to walk through 20 inches of sediment and muck. I mean, I had over, you want to throw yourself under the bus, I had 100 foot of dock. At the end of last year when the lake went down because we didn't have the weather that we wanted, I pulled my boat early. Why? Because at the beginning of 100 foot it was sitting in dry land, and at the end of it, it was 1.5 foot deep. Over 150 foot.
If I may, sir, therein lies, for me, the big problem.
Yes, sir.
The biggest problem. This is like someone that's reached their hand in the cookie jar. Their hand has been slapped, and they still want the cookie. The information that's before this board has been mincing words between we're fixing the shoreline versus we're creating better access for our boats. You said it, Mr. Oakey has said it, all of that is done in the absence of a permit,
I'm not arguing that.
and the permit needed to get acquired. With regard to the comment that it's commonplace, nothing that I have observed in my 30-something years of being on this lake and my 2+ years as being a board member has ever reached even closely the magnitude of what occurred on this site. Not only in the absence of a permit, in a permit that was specifically denied. And Mr. Oakey, respectfully, I'll say it again, I think your conduct is reprehensible. You applied for the very same work It was denied. You didn't like what answer you got, so you went in without any reservations about moving heavy equipment in and out. And now we have an afterthought that in the remediation plan, the contractor now finds there might be some issues moving in and out. I've listened carefully to everything that's been said, and I read even more carefully everything that's been presented to the board. And I submit respectfully, I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. This was intentional conduct in the absence of a decision that was denied.
Sir,
I understand.
I don't have an argument.
I understand you don't have an
I
argument
can
with
only
me.
tell you the characters of my
Well-
neighbors and how.
Yeah, we don't
Okay,
deny what we
that's-
did is wrong, I understand what we did is wrong.
Okay. Any,
Do you have any questions for me?
any questions?
No, I don't.
Thank you, I appreciate your comment. Did you?
I understand what we did is wrong, and you're labeling me as a criminal and like.
I'm not labeling you as a
You're
criminal.
as
There are
something
rules.
before. I understand that, we broke them, and I wanna fix the problem, I wanna do the, plan that they wanna do, but it has to be, that's our problem. I would've done it and walked away from it months ago if I could've, but the plans didn't work. I don't wanna enjoy the property, I wanna put this in my past so I can sell the property. And as far as the trees go, that happened when I first bought the place, there were trees that were dangerous and falling, and I didn't know, and the room around the lake is do it, it's okay, and then they approached me, I paid the fine, I paid a fee for the tree removal, or for the trees, and then they asked me to plant 6 trees for the 2 that were gone. Where they told me to plant them on the water line, I planted them, I told them the water line goes higher than that, they told me to put yearlings, no one came back and checked, no one nothing, they died and washed away in the water.
I'm not
So I do
concerned
try to
about
do
the
what I'm supposed
trees.
to, but I understand what we did was wrong, and I apologize for that. And I do wanna do a plan to fix it, and put this behind us. I don't wanna go through this. So I mean, just so you understand where I stand, I'm not some criminal that's.
I'm
Wild
not
West.
accusing
I'm
you of being a
business owner,
criminal. No,
23
this is
years,
not a
my
criminal
record is clean as
proceeding.
it gets, but that's what you called me a little while ago.
I didn't call you a criminal. I'm very careful with the words that I would use, sir. I certainly did not call you a criminal. I did say that I'm a homeowner on the lake, no different than you,
Yeah, I understand that.
and the rest of us get permits,
Yeah.
and certainly don't undertake.
But I understand, I'm saying, yes, it was wrong, you don't have to keep, that's the point, I understand. You know, I wish, if I could rewind time, I would, but there's nothing I can do about it now, but try to do what they need to do, and we're trying to make it work. But the season, the lake went up 11 feet higher than it was ever. For the March 23rd, it was about 5-6 feet higher than it normally was for the year. It filled up early, it was the warmest winter we've ever had since I can remember at 43 years old. So the winter was impossible as far as the ground. When we did the restoration plan with the wetland and got a guy in there who we hired, who was a professional, who's worked on this lake before, by noon he was begging to get the machine out because he thought he wouldn't be able to get it out because it was going to get stuck because the ground got soft so quickly. After that, it's been not even 30 degrees at night. So that was our problem, is even trying to come to an agreement for a restoration plan and getting it done in time. It was impossible. So I don't know what else to say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions in general? Well, gentlemen, we need to discuss this and make a determination. I know one of the biggest problems I have when I took over here is that everybody knows there's rules and they have to be applied even-handedly, or else we'll have bulldozers everywhere, and that concerns me. We have a recommendation from our staff. We have a recommendation from DEC, and I mean, we're not experts, and none of us are, and my feeling is that access permits will be reissued when the remuneration is done. That would be my first thought, but what's everybody else think?
I don't have a problem reissuing them once DEC satisfied. Because that's not my area.
I have a
That's
whole
what he said.
different approach.
I know you do.
I have a whole different approach.
The only problem I had with the entire presentation was the end of the presentation by the lawyer when he tried to justify this whole thing because there was possibly other illegal actions that had been done without
You don't
permits
know.
somewhere around the lake.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Well,
I don't
you have
like
to,
that.
you have to,
Well,
You have to
My
act
rec-
on what you know.
Right.
And based upon what I know, my recommendation is Mr. Oki gets a 5-year revocation subsequent to remediation. Miss Edwards, who wrote a very sincere letter, I think is caught in the middle of all this. And her license, her permit should be restored once the remediation. And Gizzy, I think, should have 1 year additional revocation after the remediation. I just do not think that we're being proper stewards of this lake if we slap someone on the wrist with the magnitude of the work that was done, not just without a permit, because we faced these issues before. This was where a specific permit was applied for to do this very work, and it was denied. And then you go ahead and do the work anyway. I think that's the most reprehensible slap in the face of staff and this board if we do less than a 5-year revocation.
No, I don't agree with that, so.
Well, I understand you don't
Let's,
agree with that.
Could we get a
I
resolution?
understand you, I understand
I understand where you're coming from.
your passion.
Well, it's not my passion. There are 98% of the people, including myself, that follow the rules.
I understand that.
And they're there to protect this lake and protect the environment and to protect everybody's equal ability to use this recreational facility.
I understand that, and what they did was wrong, and if they correct the situation to everyone's satisfaction, to me,
To me, that's not sending a proper message.
Would
That's
you like
my
to put that in the form of a motion?
Let me think about that for a second.
Shouldn't we have the other board members involved in this too?
No, we have a quorum today. I think,
Yeah.
I think we need to dispose of it. That would be my,
Probably,
By the way, as long as I'm
Mhm.
articulating what my position
Please.
is, the docks are still on the regulating district property, and they need to be removed from the regulating district property
Well, if we revoke the
during
permits,
whatever,
they will have to be.
whatever
I
revocation
assume.
period is agreed
Is
upon.
that correct?
Correct.
If permits are revoked, then everything will have to be removed from the property.
Correct.
What's that?
I have to move docks, can they come up to Mrs. Edwards' property line? I mean, they're big, I honestly don't know how to move them, I mean, they were floated there, so I don't know.
I think.
It'd be above the property line.
We'll work with John on that, right? I think it worked.
Technically, if you don't have a permit, you're not supposed to have anything on there.
On their private property.
Oh, on the private
They can move to
property, it's fine.
private property.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
You have to
no.
move it up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, John would like a motion for something that we can.
I make a motion that we revoke all 3 permits, I assume there's 3,
Correct.
access permits, to be reinstated upon satisfaction of remedial work to the DEC and to staff.
Do you have a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Anybody?
Including,
We are legal with this?
Yeah, could I
please,
flush out your motion a little bit?
absolutely,
I'll give you just
because I'm
couple of
floundering
thoughts.
here.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Bergstresser made a motion that the board determine that the permittees, Connie Jo Edwards, access permit 13547, Sean Sioki, access permit 15260,
Correct.
and William P. and Andrea Gizzi, access permit 15357,
Correct.
violated NYCRR 60646 by removing and or causing to remove extensive quantities of material from the Sacandaga Reservoir without authorization, and then pursuant to 6 NYCRR 60695A1, this violation constitutes grounds for revocation of each access permit. Further, that the board determine that each permittee should be eligible to apply for an access permit only upon completion of site remediation to the New York State DEC's satisfaction.
Including resolution of that, not just the remediation.
Resolution of the
Whatever,
violation
that is correct.
and
Payment of any fines.
Okay. So to the satisfaction of the DEC, payment of all fines and a resolution
You still second that?
by the board.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
And one abstention.
Then we
Uh,
have
Then I
no-
Motion
oppose.
carries. I appreciate the difficulty this is
Yeah.
for everybody. and-
Wait, time out. You
So
need-
right now, you have 3 votes in favor of revocation, 1 abstention and/or opposition, which means there is no revocation.
Oh,
That's-
okay.
I
that's
vote in
the-
favor then. There's no way I'm leaving without a revocation.
I see changes as well.
I'll change to,
Okay, so we have 4 votes in favor of revocation on the motion articulated by Mr. Bergstrasser.
Right. And fluffed by council.
As I said, I appreciate the difficulty this has been, and I appreciate everybody's comments. This has not been an easy issue for us, and I thank everybody's input. And with that, we will move on to number 9. An action of
thank you, Mr. Feller.
thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, Jeff, but I couldn't go that far.
That's why we have a board.
That's why we have a board. We
That's
can
why we have a board.
disagree.
Absolutely.
That's right. So,
You're
As
lucky
you
I
know,
wasn't on my bandwagon.
um,
Really.
Mr. Clark resigned a few months ago, and we have been actively seeking a replacement. We have found one that we are very, very pleased to announce today. He would have been here today. He is taking a long-planned vacation in Hawaii with his wife.
He's smarter than all of us.
But we get to vote him in. I just would like to give you a few words on his bio. If my phone comes on. Hang on. His name is Robert Mullin, for those of you who, this is his bio, I'm just gonna read it for you real quickly. Robert Mullin,
It's easy to read it on that.
thank you, much easier to read it on that.
I knew I had that.
The Board of Directors of the Hudson River Blackpool Regulating District are pleased to announce the hiring of Robert J. Mullin as the next Executive Director, effective May 19th, 2016. Mr. Mullin has served in the United States Marine Corps, rising to the rank of Colonel before his retirement in 2015. He served as an infantry officer on active duty, completing 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. A 1986 graduate of Gloversville High School, he also attended Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and the National Defense University. Colonel Mullin has been married for 19 years and has 4 children. I can add to that he's currently living in Niskayuna and building a house in Gloversville. He grew up on the lake, and I'll tell you, he's so excited to be starting that I think if I'd asked him to be at this meeting, he would have canceled the trip with his wife. I've met with him a number of times, and he's raring and ready to go. Everybody who has talked to him has been anyway, we're very pleased to have him, and I think he's going to make an excellent addition to our staff, and he starts on the 19th. That's if we vote him in.
Oh.
We have to officially vote to hire him as the director. And so I would like a motion.
There's a
that we have-
resolution,
a
we have a
resolution.
resolution on page 43 of the packet.
Yeah, that's got his salary and everything in it?
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? We have hired Mr. Smallins, and I'll tell you, it's a good hire, folks. Yes.
Is there a brief summary of the process? Is it a governor appointee or?
No, the way this went down is that we put a notice in the paper. We got all kinds of applications. The board interviewed, we went through a couple of rounds of interviews, and then we decided on the candidate. One other thing that needs to be done when Mr. Clark resigned, somebody stepped up and helped us through this transition period, and as well as all the staff doing just yeoman job. And I personally want to thank Mr. Ferrara for the efforts that he's put in as the interim and doing his other job as our comptroller and not missing a beat. And I think the board owes him a great deal of thanks. And
Thank you.
we do.
But he's not off the hook yet.
Thanks for reminding me.
I had you sweating when I was late, didn't I?
Okay, we'll move on to more mundane issues. A report of the executive director.
Mr. Chairman, my report is on page 45. And I'll just get to, there's a couple of actions I need the board to take. As I reported, I believe it was a meeting or two ago, that the district's dental insurance carrier, Blue Shield, had informed us that our current coverage provided under that 100% plan would no longer be available due to a change in group size having to do with the Affordable Care Act. In any event, we quickly went out and sought other options. Number one, through Blue Shield, our current provider, and others. And as much as staying with the current plan initially seemed to make a lot of sense, I think the fact that they didn't have certain coverages just wasn't going to work, and they made no assurances beyond maybe we could include those things in the next couple of years. So we started looking at CSCA's plans, and after careful review, I determined that the Duchess plan offered through CSCA was the one that most closely matched. I mean, it was really nothing that was going to come close to the plan that we had. But in terms of the type of coverage and then trying to make sure the cost was as close as we could get it, that plan is the one that I recommend. And just to be very specific, from a cost standpoint, that plan will be approximately $70 more a month.
Per employee?
Per
No,
employee?
no,
For the
no,
district?
okay.
Totally.
For us?
Correct, that's it.
That's
So
pretty
it's
reasonable.
Yeah, very reasonable.
Does she want the bio? That's the bio, but the new director.
Oh, you want that. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, go ahead,
No.
yeah.
Thank you.
Offer it, then yank it back.
So if it,
You offer it and then, never mind.
if you could, yeah, if you can.
I
It's
just
not
don't
very
know if
big
it's
deal.
legal, you know, did I do something wrong? That's all.
So on page 46, if it pleases the board, I have a resolution that would authorize the selection of that plan that would be put in play, would replace the current plan, which expires June 30th of this year.
Perfect.
This plan would go into effect July 1. The other neat thing about this plan is that all the folks who have vision through CSCA, there's no signing up, so basically they just get the dental added to their already
Okay.
dental vision coverage, so made the administration a lot easier. So on 46 is the resolution.
Need a motion to accept the new dental?
I'll make that motion, I guess.
If Mr. Rosenthal.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Also, as I mentioned in my report, Budget Bulletin D 1133 dated April 25th, 2016, titled Management Confidential Action, Salary Actions, 2% parity increase effective April 1, 2016, triggered the next salary actions for staff, which have been processed and will go retroactive back to April 1. I've also included for the board's information on page 47, just a quick memo to that effect. And if the board has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them regarding this.
No.
Also, and actually finally, all senior staff, less Mr. Fulton, who had something else that he was not able to participate in this annual New York State Internal Control Association Conference. It was held April 28th, and the purpose of the conference was to focus on recent changes in the standards for internal control in New York State, dated March 2016, which I provided the board. Specifically, just go over a couple things. As I'm sure everybody is aware, internal control is basically a process affected by an entity's board of directors, you guys, management, and other personnel designed to provide reasonable assurance, not guarantees, regarding the achievement of objectives relating to operations, reporting, and compliance. The definition reflects certain fundamental concepts. Basically, internal control is geared to achieving our objectives in one of the following categories: operations, reporting, and compliance. It's a process consisting of ongoing tasks and activities. It's obviously affected by people. It involves management, staff, as I indicated, and actions that we all take at every level in the organization. It cannot be reduced simply to policies, procedure manuals, systems, and forms. Internal control will succeed or fail depending on the attention the organization's employees give it. Able to provide reasonable but not absolute assurance to an entity's senior management and board of directors, and flexible in application to the entire entity or to a particular subsidiary, which we have none, division, which we have none, operating unit or business process, which we have many. 3 objectives, operations objectives pertaining to the effectiveness and efficiency of our operations, performance, financial performance, reporting objectives, which are very important, which is the stuff that you guys get every month from me, indicating the district's financial condition, and then compliance objectives, dealing with adherence to, obviously, laws, regulations, contracts, and other management directives to which the entity is subject. Why is internal control important? All organizations need internal controls. So you can't complete your mission successfully without controls. You just be running amok all over the place. So you need a lot of checks and balances, which we have in place. All organizations have them in place, but you need something that brings it together and presents a way to monitor and make sure that these things don't need to be changed, whatever the issue is. And the easy one is prevent loss of funds. Number one thing we do is we protect the district's resources. We need to establish some standards of performance around that kind of stuff. Again, back to compliance with laws, regulations, policies, and procedures. Very important, preserve integrity, avoid bad publicity. That we don't need to explain that one. Ensure public confidence and protect all employees. And at the end of the day, what we have in place really only needs to be tweaked, but it is going to, it's really going to require the compliance officer, myself, and as we go out to the troops, to look at the procedures we already have in place around internal control so we can incorporate these 17 principles, and I'm not going to list them. They are in the 2016 guide, but they fall, the 5 components are the control environment, which we have an excellent environment, the risk assessment, which we've already done, which we will just basically go through one more time, the fact that we are a very static environment, we're not acquiring things, we're not changing our mission, makes assessment pretty straightforward. Then it's those activities that control what goes on in terms of the activities and transactions that would present those areas that could result in fraud or what have you. Information and communication, which is probably the thing that we lack on it. We need to be more vigilant and consistent in our communication from the top down, which we will do this time around again. We just need to kind of do this at least on an annual basis in terms of the importance of internal control. And then the thing that we do all the time is we monitor what's going on. And that's through my visits to offices, doing audits, what have you. And again, as I said, the district, so for us, it's just gonna require amending, revising what we already have in place. So it's not a reinvent the wheel, it's kind of tweak it and get it to meet the new IC guidelines in 2016 document. So that's what I have. If the board has any questions, I'd be willing to have an answer them.
Then we move on to contracts. Motion to approve the annual report. Mr. Farr?
I have a little post-it note for that. So the annual report is already on the district's website. It's under its policies and procedures webpage. I actually brought a copy for the board so you can see that it essentially, year to year, again, back to our static mission, doesn't change a whole lot. Has the engineering stuff in it, the legal stuff in it, the latest financial report. So as we have done historically, we're just asking the board to, by motion, approve the district's annual report.
Make that motion.
Mr. Bergstrom.
I'll second.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Any discussion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Also on page 48, 49, and 50, you will find the authority mission statement, performance measurements. This one is our annual review. And that annual review should say 5/10/2016. Again, there has been no change in the district's mission. The performance goals that we use are the same goals we've used since we've incorporated or followed this authority mission performance measurement review. Metrics are the same. There are questions on here having to do with acknowledging everything about the mission and the measurements and the performance goals.
You actually have to read the mission statement to them.
Oh, I do. Okay, I will do that.
No way.
As you guys are, and this won't be the first time you guys hear this, right?
The mission of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District is to construct, maintain, and operate reservoirs in the Upper Hudson River and Black River watershed, including the Sacandaga Indian, Black Moose, and Beaver rivers, for the purpose of regulating the flow of streams or rivers when required by public welfare, including public health and safety. Regulating reservoirs operated by the regulating district include Great Sacandaga Lake, Indian Lake, Stillwater Reservoir, Sixth Lake, and Old Forge. Benefits derived through the successful completion of the mission include, but may not be limited to, flood protection to the public corporations, counties, and parcels of real estate, power plants, downstream of impoundments, low flow augmentation to provide sufficient water flow, enabling downstream wastewater treatment plants to avoid increased treatment costs associated with waste discharge to lower volume rivers, and enabling downstream hydroelectric plants to generate low-cost hydroelectric power in the hot summer months when rates are generally highest.
Now, should we on question 5?
Yeah, they should need,
Right.
you need to sign that.
Right, so I will pass this around so the board can sign the fact that you've acknowledged and understood the responsibilities
Oh, we have
of
to
those.
approve it.
Yes. you do.
Motion to approve?
Yes, and actually, and then we could do the motion now to approve your annual review of the mission statement, and then you guys can sign it.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution to authorize the purchase of a zero-turn lawnmower.
Yes, page 51 is my memo, page 52 is the resolution. This subject, zero-turn mower, there was a mower in the budget.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm bringing it before the board is that the current budget for the mower that, at the time, I don't even think we knew exactly what mower we were gonna purchase, but it was $4,500. This mower, however, is at $7,310.40. So basically what I'm asking the board is to authorize the additional $2,800 to purchase the mower.
Did we add air conditioning and a sound system?
We left all those things out. This is
Okay.
a pretty straightforward, John, what's it say?
I was just
Gravely, correct.
It proves, however, we are not a stagnant organization.
That is
We're
true.
buying a new lawnmower.
That is
That's right.
true. And a nice one.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second?
I'll second that.
Any
Mr.
discussion?
Bergstresser, Mr. Hayes.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Staff committee reports, first one, general counsel, Mr. Leslie.
There's two things going on. One is the Erie Borlex matter before the U.S. Court of Appeals. We did finally get a briefing schedule from the U.S. Court of Appeals. And then they immediately changed it, so I also go to my phone to find the latest. The Erie's brief is due June 15th. FERC's reply is due August 15th. And our reply, which will be much shorter, is going to be August 22nd. So good news. So we're moving forward on that. The other good news has to do with the other case that's a big deal for us at this point, Niagara Mohawk. Niagara Mohawk finally submitted to our council their draft stipulations of settlement and order. I've executed them. I've sent them back over to Niagara's council, who will execute them and serve them. Once they've served them on the courts will hopefully acquiesce, sign them, give them back to us. We will then have NIMO serve them. Actually, our council will serve them on all of the parties. We still need to get up to talk to the 5 counties in the Black River area, each of whom would be impacted by a new apportionment that is made a requirement of that settlement. I think the race is on to make sure that we get up there and give them a clue as to what's going on before they get served with an order that they look at and go, what the hell does this mean? So
Okay.
that's
Got it.
kind of
That sounds good.
Any I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
no, that's it.
Any questions, comments? Next, compliance officer, Mr. Zicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 54. Just a couple of things to report. We had several MWBE-related reports that were due this past month. Those were all submitted and approved by ESD. Our current first quarter 2016-17 utilization currently is at $24,565 with Ryan Biggs. As I mentioned in every board meeting, on pages 55, 56, and 57, you will find the contract status reports. They are there for your review. Their inclusion in your packet satisfies the Public Authority Law Section 2879 requirements, so please take a look at those. I took a trip to the Black River area office to complete internal control compliance testing, and I will be completing the same at our Mayfield and the Albany offices. And lastly, under the new SDVOB requirement, the 6% for businesses for disabled veterans, I am looking for and contacting some businesses with some upcoming projects we have at Mayfield. We're hoping to utilize them for a possible blacktop resurfacing for the sealant for the driveway and carpet replacement. If you have any questions.
Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer?
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on pages 58 to 96. I will focus on my financial summaries report on page 58. Thank you. A couple updates, very important updates. Under reporting, the New York State Hudson River area state share of $1 million and the Black River area state share, the amount of $250,000 have been received.
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
The only issue was they ended up putting them in the same STIP account for the Hudson River. They're now split. each fund has their specific allocated amount. That leaves no uncollected assessments that we expect to collect. So we are good to go until we get to the next assessment year, which will begin
Very
July
good.
1. And that's, under New York State administration, I did submit the OSC budget request, which is a Part 203 report through Paris for a year ending this year, June 30th. And that is also on our website, also on the ABO's site, so we are good to go through all of the required reporting in that regard. And unless the board has any questions, that's my report.
Any questions?
Nope.
By the way, you mentioned the website, it does look great.
Doesn't it?
Yes,
It does. The photographs are really an attraction to it, to get a
Those of
little
you who've
quick
not gone
history.
to it, it's brand new and real nice site.
Thank you.
Chief Engineer, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins at page 97. Despite the unusual beginning tour refilling across Black River and Hudson River area, each one of our reservoirs are fairly close to historic average elevation.
Yeah.
Great Sacandaga Lake is only 0.3 of a foot below historic average. It's 0.8 of a foot above the target elevation. Indian Lake, 0.4 of a foot above historic average. Stillwater, about a half a foot below, but at the spillway crest, and that's consistent with our slight modification that we've been making in order to accommodate some of the folks at Beaver Lake, immediately downstream, in an attempt to maybe handle some additional peak inflows if we get them at the end of our refilling cycle. And so we've kind of left that little buffer, but if we get a little bit of rain toward the end of this month, we might bring that reservoir back up to closer to that 1678.3 elevation, but nonetheless it's still in fine condition, I think. Six Lake and Old Forge are right at within 1/10 of a foot of historic average and still refilling. And at this point, with precipitation in April, for the most part, well, at least through April 26th, the date of my report, in the Hudson River area, we're between 70 and 90% across the watershed. And in the Black River area, we were around 80% of historic average precip, certainly sufficient to, with some adjustments to our releases, to get to where we need to be in terms of refilling. And I think at this point, especially if we get just a little more rain, a little half-inch rain here and there between now and the end of the month, we'll have more than sufficient inflow to top the reservoirs off.
And you're going to work on the temperatures now too, right?
I can't make any guarantees there. So I think we should be just fine. Actually, I think right now all the reservoirs are in good position for the begin of the, if you will, the begin of the cycle, which is about on or about unofficially June 1st when we start to draw down the reservoirs and start the process all over again. Very cool. So I'll take any questions if there are any.
Any questions, comments?
Good job.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Administrator, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 131. We just completed a new office space that was built in the SFO, our field office in Mayfield, to make room for a new ED. In doing so, we've made a lot more room for reorganizing, it's given us a lot more room in there and more user-friendly in the office, so it's working out good. Operations normal in the Black River area, and things are crazy in the Hudson River area. We, with the encroachment that we had here, we talked about, there's several other ones seem to be popping up every day. DEC is involved with another one that we're looking at with some tree cutting. And last week we found a shed on us that people are living in. So we sent out staff over there yesterday. We staked out the area, showing the state property line, and then it ends up being 3 sheds and a camper on us. So, we're in the process of getting that corrected. So, a little crazy down here this, starting of the year, if you will. If anybody else has any more questions on the report, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Any other board member questions or comments?
I have one. A few months ago, for various reasons, we tabled something, the employment of another person in the Hudson River area. Do you remember? I believe we were up in Long Lake.
I vaguely, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, engineering assistant?
could have been.
Remember?
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I believe, yes, right, because
Yeah.
former director Clark was,
Yeah,
right.
and we tabled it at the
Right.
time. Should we,
We haven't missed it.
I mean, John and I have had, on occasion, talked about, particularly in the field office, looking to add a person or whatever, but we haven't made any
would it
decision.
behoove us
I
to approach
probably,
it?
say again?
Would it behoove us to approach it? Yeah.
Don't make a recommendation to us.
Yeah.
Then you-
It's probably something I'd probably want to get the new director involved in.
Okay.
Seeing now that
I just thought it'd be-
he's on board and, if we're contemplating additional staff, he probably,
Something to get his feet wet.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but thanks for the reminder, I
Okay.
completely,
Need a resolution for the next board?
could I just under,
Oh, sure.
I know it's board, but,
That's okay.
we were going to, council just wanted to discuss, briefly as a first reading, if you will, the policy for
Go ahead.
sexual harassment.
Yeah.
That the board has received,
Right.
I believe, the third draft.
3 drafts.
It's just simply complying with the new
I assume it was tweaking
provisions,
our
shall
own-
we say?
Our current policy really has everything come straight through the board,
Right.
and there is a new 10-step process that
Right.
basically brings everything through council's office. And,
Aren't you lucky?
yeah, I'm thrilled with the whole thing. So this revision would basically bring our policy in
But-
line with that policy.
But it also comports with the process statewide, am I correct?
Yes.
With all other state agencies.
Yes.
I think that's the critical
As we understand.
point to be made, that we are making sure that we comport with what is the process statewide.
Correct.
And we have a policy on policies, which basically requires the board to
Do 3 readings.
do a 3 reading
Right.
before they adopt anything, which prevents us from sticking something under your nose and having you not have an opportunity to fully understand it before you believe you're expected to adopt a new policy. So from that perspective, the idea was bring it to you this month. We'll probably end up
Bless you.
putting it in a committee for next month, and then the following month you
Vote on
can.
it.
Okay.
It really is only 2
changes.
2 months, but it's 3 meetings.
Okay.
Good.
Good.
You're being very good.
Resolution for the next board meeting, 614 in Inlet.
Make that motion.
Mr. Bergstresser,
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now I need a resolution to go into executive session.
Motion to go
And I
into
will tell everybody, we're not gonna be conducting any business coming out of executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Rosenfeld.
To go
Into executive.
For just
collective bargaining?
collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining.
I'll second.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, we are in executive session.